Here we go, getting started. Everything looks good. Got lights, red, green light, red light. Time looks good. Good afternoon, I'm Agamemnon the First. The only. Welcome to Chronicles of Earth 9. This is a fan fiction, our writer's workshop series that we do. We do it on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Although yesterday and day before we didn't really. We did the workshop, but Friday we just did a review. And then yesterday we finished up book 2. We had been reviewing book 2, Road of Redemption, the video version of that. It's up on the site now. So that'll be done. I'll be making the highlight clips for it. I usually make those on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday because those are our downtimes. So it's easier to make those clips on those days. But today is the 23rd of June, 2019. It's 14 minutes after 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. Streaming live out of Tampa, Florida. We do that every day. As I was saying, from 2 to 5. And then we take a break from 5 to 6 every day. Hour break for the intermission. Then we do the grind from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock every night. And then try to finish around 10 each night. And then for the most part, that allows us to get all the video production stuff done in the later part of the evening. And then not to mention I like stopping around 10 o'clock at night because then I can watch other people's streams. When we were doing the 12-hour streams, it was very difficult to do that because you would get up like at noon and you go all the way till midnight, or you start at 6 o'clock at night and you go all the way to 6 in the morning. And so it was very difficult to watch other people. But we break at 10. It makes it easy to watch other people stream now. And you might be thinking of putting together a streaming site. If you're trying to expand your audience, especially in the early days, I have found that it's useful when you're going out and meeting other, learning the community and building your community at the same time. It's good to get out and view other people, and that will help build your community one follower at a time. Hopefully in a positive direction. Word spelled wrong. But let's go ahead and let's get going. There's a lot that we need to do, but I need to organize my thoughts. We're going to minimize this. So can leave the chat up here because we're going to be using the desktop. We need to load up. First thing we're going to do is load up Windows Excel. That's what we have to do first. You might be saying, what does Excel have to do with writing? Well, we've reached a point in our new projects where we have to start laying down some facts, and one of the ways you do that, at least we do through writing, is the timeline. We have to make sure we go in and map out all the characters' ages, their timeline, when they were born, when they die. We have to point out some of the new characters that we've added. Some of the new characters that we had to add them to the timeline so that everything is factual. That way, when we're mentioning dates, some of the stories go back decades and project ahead by decades. So we have to know where everyone's going to be. Makes it easier to write a story, I think, especially with this story since it's serial. If you have a really good sense of the longer story, how all these things come together and where people are going to be, it makes it easy to write that one little section, because knowing all the people sort of historical moments makes it easy to craft a story around where they're at in the story and plot around them anyway. And that's where we're at today. We need to do this. So now it's a question of where did we put that thing at? It is. Open up this one. You hear someone shouting in the background. That's just people talking really loud on the phone, and I can't do anything about that. The mic should filter it out. It's got the compressor and filter shouldn't pick up on the background noises, but sometimes they don't show on the meters and it's still picking up that noise, but it should filter that out since it's way on the behind me, but sometimes it won't. So here's our master timeline, and so far it goes up to 1944. What we have to do is we have to expand it out to 1960, and then for the current story, and then the next book 20, 18, 19, and 20 takes us from 1945 to 1955, so it's a 10-year period of time. So we got to know where all the people are going to be, and these two tabs were pretty much set for book 1, book 2, and book 3, somewhat book 5. Book 4 we're still mapping out, but most of the characters in book 4 are carryovers from book 3 anyway, so. And then all the characters carry over, all the protagonists carry over from book 4 to book 5 in the serial, and then we introduce most of the immortals. In the book 5 we get to meet most of the immortals at that point, and so they haven't really been properly introduced in the serial, so we need to do that. So let's go here. So we need to add I hate that when on the bar they don't have the simple stuff on the bars anymore. They have like stuff you don't really use all up in there, and then the stuff you really need it to have, you have to go like 10 layers deep into the program to use. Like whoever made this page is kind of an idiot. Hmm. Just one thing that Excel sucks at. Um, all other spreadsheet editors, you can just simply go in there, hit the button, and then boom, drop 10 columns in there. But here you gotta go some long rounded out procedure just to add cells in the block here. I gotta do it one by one. Well, we had to manually do it. Yeah, yay. So this. Uh, the 1945. 1906. I don't think you can go this way, can you, on Excel? Okay. Yes, you did it. Cool. Okay. So Whose character is this? Why does it do that? Why does it jump to 3 blocks and then you have to go back and redo it every time? Why can't it just simply click the one you want without wrecking everything? So we just need to extend everybody's ages here. Once we get that done, then we have to add the new characters in. And then so forth. I don't know. We'll see. So Alan Scott's the next guy up. Troy. This here. But insert column to insert another one. Just make one of these a buffer, so in case we gotta add more, it'll already be there. This one will so let's do this. Oh, this buffer. So in case we gotta add more in, these spaces will already be here and we'll have to diddle daddle with that anymore. We'll update it to Joe West timeline when we get into doing that actual story. You screw that up. Very easy to do that with Excel, because Excel is very clumsy program, and you're not paying attention, you could screw up stuff real quickly, and it won't be the wiser. Here are the other Titans. Ares is 4.5 million. Athena is 4.5 million. Hera is 8.5. Themis is 13 billion, or 4.5 billion, 13 billion. Uranus is 13 billion. Gaia is 13 billion, and Prometheus is 13 billion. And Jay Garrick is 27. John Jones is 706 years old in that time period. I wonder if you could lock this. Cyrus Go, it says he's 31 there, so we gotta here go this way. 1544. Silas Wayne. Patrick will be 37 in 1955. His son, Thomas, is born in the time that Diana is away, which is this period of time we're going to highlight and put it in green. Where this orange mark is, the start of our serial begins there. That's the year we're saying that William Marston started. That's when everything begins, and everything that happened in the first 2 years was stuff that happened in the comic book, which we're saying is sort of true. We were going to rewrite some of those stories, but for the most part, the factual part of those stories are true. It's happened. And then from 1943, there really isn't any written material. that's when our fiction takes over, and our people are together at that point. And from 1943 onward, everything's new. But from 1941, that's sort of our zero reference point for the people who are thousands of years old, for the people who are millions of years old. That's our zero reference point, is 1941. And then so everything else is sort of dictated by that. The people who are missing dates, like Kenneth, Alan, Solomon, they're the ones that are dead in the story, so they didn't continue on past that point. But Elizabeth Wayne, we need to project her out. Oop. She's got to live into the 1980s when she eventually dies. She'll be in her 80s in that time period, right? So when 1955 rolls around, she's 59 years old at that time. Almost 60 at that point. So lived a long time. It's about Connie's 91. He's young looking in the story because Celine Kyle is keeping him young. She's 86 in the story. Although she looks like she's 25 years old. Manfred's in his 50s. When he meets Diana in the park, he's 61. So and in 1955 he's 60. So he lives until a very long period of time. He lives until his like 90s. Theodore Cobblepot's still alive, but we're going to end up killing him off at some point. Because he's in his 80s. But we'll have him survive the war and eventually be killed off. And his son, because he's in his 90s by 1955. Somewhere in this time period we got to kill him off. Which should be... he should die between 1945 and 1950 is when he should die. Somewhere in his 80s, kill him off. And his son, in his 50s. Now why it added all these decimal point values in there, I have no idea. Why did it do that? Stupid program. Why is it adding these decimal points in? Now why did it put that in there like that? There's some stupid thing that Microsoft programs do. You're going along, everything's going good, and it does some stupid stuff. Why did they put all those decimal points in there? Makes no sense. It's following the series. I missed 49 there, that's what happened. Should be 49. Right. $35.01. 35.02. Someone yelling behind me. Very rude. People. As soon as the mic comes on, now they got stuff to say. They weren't talking when there weren't mics on, but as soon as you turn a microphone on, it's you got something to say. Oh. I'm just gonna leave the mics on. If they say something embarrassing and thousands of people hear it, so be it. I'll teach them a lesson. So Donna Troy is 500 years old at the start of our series. She's 501, 502, 503. And then she's mid 500s, where Drusilla is only a couple hundred years old. Not as old. And why we're sort of having this is you sort of see the different angels. One who's right at the century mark. And there she's at 15 times to the first power. And Donna is 15 times to the fifth power, whereas Diana is 15 to the 28th power. And Hippolyta is 15 to the 35th power. That's how much power she has in her abilities. The incubus that they're going to be dealing with in the story in book 3 and 4, he's 6 million years old, so he has a lot of power. And Jake Garrick, just say 28. $707. 707. For some reason, Windows has got stupid stuff to do here. Why did it wipe everything out? I hate this stupid program. Excel sucks. Oh, wants to be an asshole. What's going on here? Asshole. Let's do this. Just drop it in a new worksheet, but it will carry all the stuff over too, won't it? Just stuck in. Cool. Let's go ahead and save it. Okay, so we gotta add Diana Prince in there. Here, here, here. No fill. Diana Prince in there. Um, she's the daughter. She's born in here. So born in December, so that'd be 1. Here's 0 year and 1 year. 1, 2. One. Five. Why is everything bold? Why is it always in bold? Stop doing that, jackass. So we're gonna keep saying this message every 5 minutes. Why? Got Dottie West. Dottie West is a 20-year-old woman in 1950. 20, so 19 here. Why does it keep putting that stupid thing on? Let's go with the Courier. It's 18. Okay, so we gotta go here. Go here and turn off that orange stuff. So she would have been conceived in 1930, so she was born in 1931. So Joe West. Had to be about what? Put him about 25 when Dottie's born. It's kind of okay. So Maybelline. But they're about the same age. She died in 1945 though, so she didn't live that long. We'll just do her age for simplicity, but she died in 1945, which would have been here. She died at age 39, so Gus is 44 when Dottie is 20. So Joe was born in 1906. It was Maybelline. So Evelyn will make her we'll make her 2 years younger than Maybelline, which would be 37. Make her 36. Five. 34. Okay, so Maybelline, Evelyn, Joe West, About the same age, I guess. Demetrius Amos. He's same age as Dottie, so be 25. Sebastian Montenegro. They're same age. We'll make Vanessa 1 year younger. At 24. Go. And those are all the main people. We need a Victoria, or need a Marcus. Marcus, what was the name? Mason. Amos. Come about Gus's age. Or yeah, Joe West. That's Gus West. Name is Gus. $49. Make Mason 2 years younger than Gus, which was 47. Six. 45. So been born in 1908. Wife Victoria will be I don't know what her maiden name would be yet, so we'll leave that open. We'll put her about 2 years younger than Amos, so she'd be 45. I'm gonna destroy. Might be saying, what does that 1, 2, 3 have to deal with? Because when you go back to several generations, we have to establish characters that are that old. And this timeline only goes back as far as 1761. Drusilla's born there. Alright, be right back. We're gonna take a break. Be right back. Right, here we go. Back over. Okay, I'm trying to think about how many more ages we got. Hestia, I believe, is a little younger than Diki is the daughter of Themis, so she would be younger. She would be Athena's age. Would be 4.5 million years old. So let's put that in there. I believe Hestia is Athena's age, right? Born in the same period of time. Here. Open bigger. Got to go to here. What are we looking for? Looking for Hestia, right? I don't see Hestia in there. I'll look that up. Oh, I thought I had her. I must have missed her. Well, there she is. Go ahead and save that in our file. Yeah, Hestia is Zeus's daughter, right? No, she's one of the original siblings. 1, 2, 3, yeah, 6. She's the Zeus is the youngest sibling. Hera is his sister, and they married and they had the Olympic god. So she's one of the Titans from Rhea and Cronus. So these are the eldest. They're 13 billion years old. They're the second ones. So Hestia would be the same age as Zeus. Dike is the daughter. Zeus mated with Themis, and they had a child, and her name was Dike. And in our Thor, she's part of the lasso that helped Diana. And Hestia is part of that. She's the sister of Zeus and Hera. So close that. So get a picture of her though while we're here. And the Greek there is, her name is Istia. It's a cool picture right there. Let's go with this one. Got the sauropod Hestia 5. And close that out. Just smaller. Minimize. Yeah, so Hestia is same age as Zeus. Would be 8.5 billion years old. We still have to add the sheriff in there somewhere, but I forget his name. His name Brennan. I could look it up, but I don't really want to do it right now. Times at 3:35, a half hour to 4. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and save this. Close. Make that smaller. Bring this up. Go ahead and let's review our story so we can kind of where we were when we left off. Hit that button there.
4:00 p.m. May 3rd, 2019. Athenata's Journal, December 9th, 1955. Edit, December 9th, 1956.
Make this bigger so everybody at home can see. Just kind of review it and see where we left off. Can't hurt, and roughly an hour, so gives us an hour to kill. Yeah. That way, come next episode, we'll kind of know where we're at.
4:00 p.m. May 3rd, 2019. Athenata's Journal, December 9th, 1955. Edit, December 9th, 1956. As I had reflected on the events that had transpired 1 year ago today, I wanted to reflect upon the serious nature of the encounter and all the people involved that had occurred that day. I would like to say that things are better and that all involved lived happily ever after, but that is not how the world works. What I am about to record here into this chronicle is a collection of journal entries that had been made by myself during the event and later revised by myself after many hours of thoughtful reflection. For me, I had been at the party that Dottie, Roxy, and Joey had put together to welcome Hippolyta to the community. They had decided to have the party in the barn at the spot that Diana had been born at. Of course, Joey and Roxy had cleaned up the spot and did an impressive job of laying out a wood panel flooring to act as a dance floor for the other guest. There in the corner was a wooden manger with a makeshift mannequin with me holding a baby and a bunch of ducks, pigs, and chickens about the display. I would admit that it had been really cheesy looking, but it did achieve the necessary and sufficient emotional impact. I started tearing up at the sight of it. Sometimes, I think they do these things just to make me cry. As I had looked about the court area in front of the barn and between the house, there had been everyone. They all were smiling and laughing. The adults were talking, the children were playing, and the animals were walking about. I had been doing my best to be happy and cheerful. Life had been looking up in the past few days. My mother and I had been talking again. I had missed her. Gus had seemed to take a liking to Mother. In all our discussions about my mother and after having read some of my journals, Gus had not been expecting my mother to be so youthful looking. And Diana, she never left Hippolyta's side. Her response had been as if she had gotten a new gift and did not want to let it out of her sight. Mother too. She had been eating it up. Hippolyta loved children. As I had been standing there taking in all the sights, Maybelline and I had been talking. She had told me how she had been very happy to see that in just 5 short years that laughter had returned back to the old house. It had been a long time since she had seen that here. Thank you, Red, Maybelline said. For what, Maybelline? I asked. Gus is happy, for the first time in a long time. He does not have a worry in the world. He has peace of mind. I think he is smitten with your mama, she said slightly joking at the end there. I gave her a hug. Thank you, that is sweet. Mother has always been a bit of a wild woman, I had said. Wild woman? Your mom is a lion. Red, Gus is not ready for that. Not too bad for us prostitutes, she said jokingly. As I had looked around, I had been wondering what had been keeping Dottie away from the party. It had been unlike her to be absent from a party. I wonder where Dottie is? I had asked. As I had started to use my telepathy to scan for Dottie, Maybelline started to get a bad feeling about this. What is it, Maybelline? I asked. I don't know. I feel something bad has happened, she said. As I went to make a scan, the telephone had rung. I had walked over to answer it. Hello? I asked. Oh Red, I did a terrible thing. I need your help down at the apartment. Please come quickly. Dottie cried in a weak voice. At that moment, I had used my telepathy and my empathy to sense for Dottie. She had been in terrible pain, and she had been in terrible agony. She had a problem breathing. She had been so weak and her life force had started to dim. As to not cause a panic with the party guest, I had used my telepathy to call to Roxy. Roxy, come on, we're going, I said. What, now? The party has just gotten started, Red, she said. We have to go. Dottie is in trouble, I said. And after that exchange, we formed up and went down to the apartment building. A short time later, we had gone down to Dottie's apartment on the first floor of the building. We had walked over to the door and discovered that it had been unlocked. We had opened the door and let ourselves into the premises. What we had walked into can only be described as a terrible mess. As we had scanned around the room, the furniture had been turned over and broken. It had looked like a terrible altercation had taken place here. Dottie's clothes had been scattered about the living room and they had looked as if they had been torn off. There had been blood everywhere. My heart sank in my chest. My anxieties started to run high. As we had made our way to the back bedroom where Dottie had normally stayed when she had been at home, that is when we came upon Dottie. She had been in a terrible mess. Not to make light of her circumstances, we will attempt to describe this in medical terminology to help present some dignity to this terrible matter. The patient had presented herself to us in a horrific manner. At first glance, the side of her head had been crushed in as if her head had been pushed into a hard surface of some type. The patient had been unclothed and left lying about the floor. Next to her had been the telephone that had been still off the hook and ringing to let us know that it had been enabled. As to not disturb the crime scene, we made every effort to not to contaminate the area for the police to investigate later. We had approached the patient who had been lying on the ground on her anterior side. She had been unconscious. After checking her vital signs, we had discovered a pulse and it had been slow, and she had trouble getting oxygen up into her lungs. Then, we had decided to use our truth vision and our empathy to get a more detailed prognosis. Her body had sustained multiple fractures in her right leg and left arm. She had broken ribs, lacerations all over her body. Her body had bruises all over her face, her arms, her legs, and her vagina. We went to her immediately. We placed my arms onto her and we prayed for Athena to give me all the strength to heal Dottie. We had healed her arms, her legs, her face, and her vagina. We had healed her ribs, her lungs, and her arteries. It had been in this moment that we had gone into Dottie's mind and lived her life up to this moment. We had come to know of her relationship with Demetrius, Vanessa, and Sebastian. We had come to know of the complex relationship that Demetrius had constructed with Dottie and Vanessa. We had learned about the affair Dottie had with Sebastian. We had learned it all. It would be untruthful of me to state here that my feelings at this moment had been calm. From the moment we had entered the building to this moment now, my heart had been slowly building up with rage. My first instincts had been to go find Demetrius and kill him. However, Dottie's physical health had been the more important matter at hand. As we held Dottie's head in our arms, we had just sat there with our thighs up under her head. We had caressed her hair and her face. That beautiful face on this wonderful girl. We had wondered how such a beautiful person could end up in such a mess. Why did she choose to keep this from us? Why did she not ask for our help? Why did we not act on the truth as we had known them for months? Why did she not have the faith and the trust in us? This had no longer been just a simple polyamorous relationship between three people. This had become a perversion of one man's greed and unwillingness to make a hard decision. Laziness is such a constant factor in so many people's lives. It is a very difficult thing to see the results of laziness, how it can grow and get out of control and wreck people. As we had laid there in the dark room holding her head, Dottie had regained consciousness. "Oh Red," she had cried out. She had been in a state of shock just moments before this, and as reality slowly set into her mind she had begun to calm down. She had begun to cry, "Red, this is all my fault. I caused all of this," she cried out to me. We just listened to her and let her complete her stream of thought. "You read my mind by now, haven't you?" she asked. "Yes, we have read your life and have lived your life up to this moment. We know all about this event and what all led to this encounter," we said. She took our arms while lying on our thighs. "Red, I am ashamed of all this," she cried out. We had taken her up into our arms and had given her all the love we could give. "No Dottie, this is all Demetrius' fault. He led you and Vanessa on for so long. He took advantage of your naivety, your innocence. You made some bad decisions, yes, but none of your actions had led you to a place to have your face smashed in, your arms and legs broken, and your body being violated like that. Nothing excuses that behavior, ever. I am sorry that I didn't tell you before," she said. "What do we do now, Red?" she asked. "You are not going to like what we have to say, Dottie, but we are going to have to call the sheriff so that he can come down and make an official report on the matter. We are going to have to tell Gus everything," we said. "Oh no, Red, Daddy can never know. He would be crushed. He would kill Demetrius," she cried. We took her hands into our arms to calm her anxieties. "We have to do it before it leads to something worse," we said. "What could be worse than this?" she asked. We had taken Dottie into our arms and looked into her eyes and told her the news that we had discovered when we diagnosed her injuries earlier. We could not think of a more sympathetic method of delivery. "So here we went. Before your daddy finds out that you are pregnant with Demetrius's baby." Dottie's face had turned a lighter shade of pale at that moment. The stress from the trauma and the blunt delivery of the news had been too much for her and she fainted. We had placed our arms onto hers and gently moved her over to the bed where she could lay comfortably. While Dottie had laid there, we had taken the opportunity to call the sheriff. Then, we had sat down and begun the difficult process of writing an official report for the sheriff about the matter for when he had arrived. We had left the instructions on the countertop for the deputies that would be arriving shortly, and with that, we had gathered our things and had gone looking for Demetrius.
The big thing thus far is we got the timeline updated somewhat, but I need to remember where we were writing. We're going to start writing the end piece of this, which is with
Asterisk.
Mason
3,
and
4
Victoria.
p.m. May 24, 2019, Gus's Journal, December 16, 1955. The following is a report on a matter that is very difficult for me to present without experiencing anger. I feel that it should be recorded at this time so that when my grandson is born, at some point in the future, when he comes to me and asks me why did this ever happen, I can present to him my feelings and thoughts only days after the tragic event. First, let me just state for this record that, I do not know why a young man of Demetrius's age would commit such a terrible act onto another person that he claimed to love. Second, I should state that I am recording this event several days after the event. My blood still boils with rage from what Red had shown me on Friday, December 9, 1955. I cannot change the past. However, I wonder if maybe what had been done to Dottie had not been made so public. But I have to believe that Red's decision to display the truth had to be shown to all to prevent rumors from contaminating the incident. And, those rumors are going about town now. For me, all of this started on Friday, December 9, 1955. The kids, Joey and Roxy, had cleaned up the barn and driveway to host a party to welcome Hippolyta to the town. It had been a wonderful experience for me. I can state that I had been happy at the party. I know that Athenata had been talking with my wife Maybelline at the party. Sometimes, it can be creepy or weird, but I can actually hear Maybelline through Red as she talks. Although I can only hear Red speaking, I can get a sense of the conversation. What a wonderful thing that Red has to be able to talk to loved ones who have passed on. Red told me that Maybelline had been very happy that I had some joy in my life. That did touch my heart. During the party, Red had received a telephone call. I had heard her answer the phone. Her expression had become very serious. I had seen her quietly make her way through the crowd of people and motion for Roxy to go with her. The two had formed into their symbiote form and flew over to the apartment building. I had a bad feeling about this. Some time had passed, about 45 minutes, and Red had not come back to the party. My anxieties had begun to grow. Then, I saw all the patrol cars from the sheriff office at the southern end of the property. I went to my truck and drove down to see what had been going on. I had walked into the apartment where several deputies had been standing about. The living room in the apartment had been a real mess. The furniture had been tossed about the room as if a fight had occurred in the room. Then, I saw the blood. There had been so much blood. I am not a doctor, but I have been taking care of animals for many years and know that that amount of blood had not been good for whomever it came from. I made my way to the master bedroom where a long trail of blood had been on the ground as if someone had crawled their body across the floor. That is when I found Dottie. The sheriff had been there. He had been on one knee and kneeling by the bedside where Dottie had been resting. Dottie had looked well to me. She had looked traumatized, but I could not see any injuries on her body. That is when the sheriff had taken the time to explain to me what had occurred. He had taken the liberty of telling me about the matter so that Dottie did not have to repeat the terrible story a third time. This is when he handed me a detail report that had been written by Red. I had read the report in earnest. As my eyes had read each word silently, my rage had intensified with each word. Red's report had been very accurate and had been very detailed. I had read that she had healed up Dottie's injuries. If she had not been here, Dottie, my little girl, would have more than likely been dead from the altercation. This made my heart boil. I can surely say that I wanted to find Demetrius and kill him with my bare hands. As I had looked around the apartment, I did not see Red anywhere. I had guessed that she had gone to find Demetrius. That is when I decided to go find him myself. The sheriff had sensed my intent and my motivation and decided to help me go and look for Demetrius. I think it a wise thing that the sheriff made no attempt to stop me. I can safely say that I was not in the mood. The sheriff had driven the truck. We had made our way to Mason's tavern to see if we could find Demetrius. It had been highly likely that Demetrius would go to the place since his father, Mason, had owned the place. It had been Red who had given Mason the money to open the tavern. He had worked at the concrete plant for many years and had always dreamed of running a bar. Since no bank would give Mason the loan to open a place that had a high risk of failure, Red had given Mason the money as a grant. It saddens me to think that our children could commit such cruelty to each other. But what Demetrius had done went beyond cruelty. It had been plain brutality, a behavior that I would surely deliver upon Demetrius once we had located him. A short time later, we had pulled the truck up to the tavern. There had been a large crowd of people standing in the bar where Red and Demetrius had been standing. I could hear Red talking quietly to Demetrius and the crowd of people. The sheriff and I had made our way to the bar where 20 bars of gold bullion had been placed on top of it. I had ordered a beer. Mason, who had a look of concern about what had been transpiring on the dance floor, had handed me a double draft and said, "This one is on the house, Gus." I do not know the entire details, but from the way Red is looking and the gold on the bar, My instincts are telling me that free beer is the way to go. All eyes and ears were on the dance floor. Red, in her normal soft-spoken and quiet demeanor, had explained to the crowd what was going on and why. More than that, she had used the magic lasso with the four goddess, Hestia, Nemesis, Themis, and Nike, to reveal the truth to the entire crowd of people in the bar. That lasso had formed a barrier to prevent people from stopping what would eventually occur. I venture to guess that its intent was to prevent people from getting seriously wounded by Red. Then, it started. Red had begun to rain down onto Demetrius a fury of retribution, the likes of which could only come from the hands of God. It had not been pretty. It had not been kind. As the father of the woman that had been assaulted by Demetrius, I had felt grateful that Red had found Demetrius first. I had felt every blow that had touched Demetrius's skin. I am not proud of my feelings, but I had them. I do not know if Demetrius had been deserving of such a punishment. I do not know if it should have been Red who had been the one to deliver that punishment. I only know that I had felt good. I had enjoyed the beer that I had drunk as I had witnessed the beatdown that had occurred on the dance floor. Although I am not proud of my behavior, I had felt great. After 30 minutes, Red had stopped the beatdown on Demetrius. She had pulled him onto her lap. She had been crying. It had looked to me that she had not been proud of her behavior. It had looked to me that it had saddened her to commit such cruelty to another human being. She had held his face in her hands. Then she had healed up all his injuries. Having been on the receiving end of Red's healing ability and having witnessed her heal our farm's water supply some years ago, I can safely say that she had a real gift. Demetrius had been confused by her compassionate behavior and had asked her, "Why did you heal me? Why did you not let me die for the horrible things that I did?" Red had replied with, "Now Demetrius, you understand the truth of what you did to Dottie West. I am sorry that it had to come to this. You cannot die today. I want you to live a long and happy life. I want Victoria and Mason to be able to love their son as I do. I want you and Sebastian to be good friends. I want Vanessa to love you again. I want you to have a successful career as a music producer. Finally, to answer your question, Demetrius, I am sorry that in 20 years from now, you will have the honor of explaining to your son why you raped his mother and had become his father. Then, when you see all the hurt and pain in your son's eyes, then you will know that your pain and hurt had been self-inflicted. See, you're too young to know what it is like to be a parent, to know the joy of watching them grow and love. Mason knows, Gus knows, and now, you will know that what you did will be an injury that will never heal. I can only state now that when Red had revealed the information that Dottie had become pregnant with Demetrius's son, I had been in utter shock. However, I know the extent of Red's powers. I know that she had been the daughter of God. I know that she had lived all these years with the knowledge of knowing that day her daughter will die. I know that Red had not been a cruel woman. Demetrius and Mason had been in utter shock. The crowd of people standing around had been in utter shock. Red had just put her lasso away and went home quietly. I had drunk my beer and had set it on the bar top. The sheriff and I had made our way to Demetrius, who had still been seated on the floor. I had told to the young man, "The only reason why you are alive, Demetrius, is because Red got to you before me. Had it been me in that arena, you would be dead. But, whether you like it or not, my daughter is going to have your child. I hope and I pray that I live long enough for you to explain why you raped that wonderful person, Dottie, to your son." I had put my hat on and had gone to the truck to wait for the sheriff. When I had returned home that night, I had taken Dottie to the house and she and Hippolyta had talked all night. Red had not returned to the house until later that morning. When she had returned, she had relayed to me a tale about the rest of the night that had been unbelievable. For 2 p.m. May 6, 2019, personal report made by Sheriff James Brendan Corrigan, December 9, 1955. On the night of the December 9, 1955, shortly after 7 o'clock in the evening, my office had received a telephone call from an Athenata Trier Aries, 25, who many know from her nickname Red. She is a tenant of Dottie West. Dottie West, 25, is the landlord for the apartment building and commercial property that occupies the space at the address, West Farm. Miss Audrey Aries had informed my office that Dottie West had been a victim of a sexual assault and battery by a man named Demetrius Amos, 25. My office had dispatched several deputies to the premises, and I had decided to look into the matter myself, as this incident had the potential to incite racial tension among the citizens of Clark County. To fully understand the underlying issues of this particular case, my office had been informed of matters of the highest level of security and secrecy that may have federal jurisdiction and state jurisdiction. The first matter deals indirectly to the matter and explains Miss Audrey Aries' involvement with the case. The second matter deals directly with Dottie West. The third matter deals with Stephen Gustafson West. The last matter deals with Demetrius Amos. The first matter involves Miss Audrey Aries, and I will use the name Red in reference to her for the remainder of the report. My office's history with Red goes back to 1950, when she had approached the office about a girl named Ruby Tuesday Robinson. 5. Miss Robinson had been a missing person case that my office had been investigating since 1940. Red had informed my office that the young girl had visited her while she had been laying by the pool. The little girl had told her that her name had been Ruby Tuesday. She had gotten lost and had needed help in finding her way back to her home. At first, I had been skeptical about the matter, but after listening to Red's information about the case, I had become intrigued. As to not end up in a tangent, I will state that Red helped my office close out that case. I have come to know of Red's remarkable ability for high details about facts. I suspect that Miss Aries is a meta-human and hides her identity to prevent harm from coming to herself and her family. This may seem unprofessional on my part, but I have come to respect any information that Red has been able to relay to my office on matters that require law enforcement investigation. Now, having written all the above information in this report, Red is the person who had written the detail report for my office prior to our arrival at Dottie West's address. The second matter deals directly with Dottie West. My deputies and I had arrived at Dottie West's apartment shortly after 7 o'clock in the evening. The sun had already set at the location. The crime scene had been a real mess. The furniture had been scattered about the apartment. Apparently, a desperate fight for survival had taken place in the room. Red had informed my office via her report that she had made every effort to prevent contamination to the crime scene, except for the injuries to Dottie West, which Red had healed up with her meta-human powers prior to my office's arrival there. Most of the crime scene had remained intact. There had been blood all over the apartment, and a trail of blood had led back to the master bedroom. It is here that we found Dottie West resting. The next section represents matters I have deemed necessary and sufficient for this report, and does not represent the entirety of Red's report that she had filed with my office. We had awakened Miss West from her sleep. Red had sedated her so she could heal her mind after the altercation. She had seemed startled at first, but returned to her calm state once we had identified ourselves. Miss West had informed my office at that time that she had been assaulted by Demetrius Amos earlier that day. Red had come over to the place after she had been called by Dottie via her telephone. This had been shortly around a half hour after 6 o'clock. I had ordered a forensic team to sweep the apartment, and that had allowed my detectives the time to investigate the matter for me. I will relay what Miss West had relayed to me. This will be a short synopsis of the much more detailed report that Red had provided earlier, and that will be supplemented by the medical examiner report. The altercation had been preceded by an argument about a sexual encounter between Dottie West and Sebastian Montenegro. Sebastian is a close friend of Demetrius Amos. Mr. Amos had been drinking prior to arriving at Miss West's apartment. Mr. Amos had asked Dottie if she had indeed had sexual intercourse with Mr. Montenegro. Miss West had confirmed Mr. Amos's information. Then, Mr. Amos had become enraged and attacked Miss West. The result of the attack had resulted in multiple severe injuries to Miss West, to her head, arms, and legs. Mr. Amos had sexually assaulted Miss West. This had resulted in Miss West becoming impregnated with Mr. Amos's child. Neither of the people in the matter is married, so infidelity and adultery are not a factor in this case. My office concludes that based on the hard evidence gathered and based on the victim's statements, Miss West had been sexually assaulted by the suspect. She had been battered by the suspect multiple times, which resulted in severe medical trauma. It had been the swift action of Red that may have prevented the death of the victim, Dottie West. With the amount of blood that had been measured at the crime scene, It had been remarkable that death had been avoided. It had been during the questioning of Dottie West that her father, Stephen Gustafson West, had arrived on the scene. Mr. West, or Gus, owns the small cotton farm that the apartment building Dottie West manages is located. The mother, Mabel Lean West, is deceased. Mr. West had seen the lights from the patrol cars in the south end of the property and had become very concerned for his daughter, Dottie. I had let Mr. West read the detailed report that Red had written earlier for our office, and I had taken the liberty of relaying Dottie's recollection of the event. Miss West had been severely traumatized, and I felt that having her retell the event a third time might be difficult for her to tell her father with several deputies standing about. Mr. West had read the letter and had remained remarkably calm considering what he had been able to witness from his survey of the apartment and his own daughter's account of the assault. I could tell from his facial expression that he had become extremely concerned about his daughter's circumstance, and he had become very motivated to locate Mr. Amos. Miss West had informed her father and me that Mr. West could normally be found at his father's business, Mason's Tavern. The location is a few miles north of the farm's location. Since Red had not been located at the apartment, we had deduced that she had gone to look for the suspect, Demetrius Amos. Mr. West had decided to go look for Demetrius Amos, and I had decided to accompany him to keep him from doing bodily harm to the suspect or worst. Shortly after 8 o'clock in the evening, after the sun had set for the day, we had arrived at the tavern owned by Mason Amos. There had been a substantial crowd in the building, and it had appeared the crowd had been fixated by some disturbance happening in the location. As we had walked into the tavern, Red had been standing at the center of the dance floor with Demetrius Amos. Now, Red's demeanor is normally a quiet and a soft-spoken lady. I do not know her to be a violent person or a person that seeks to engage in violence. She had been telling the crowd of people how Mr. Amos had smacked her friend around. Earlier in the evening, Mr. Amos started to deny the allegation when Red had produced a device from her waist and tossed it up in the air. The device had looked like a golden piece of rope. It had spun around the two people and kept the crowd from entering the area of engagement. Then, the rope displayed imagery, sort of a movie or a very clear television program. On the projection, had been Mr. Amos assaulting Miss West in perfect detail. This had not been just an image. The rope had produced the sight, the sound, the smell, the feel, and the taste of the event. I had felt like I had been standing in Miss West's body is the best way that I can describe the sensation. The crowd's opinion of Mr. Amos had begun to turn as the experience on the presentation had become known to all. They were not happy people. Then, Miss West had proceeded to execute her own assault and battery on Mr. Amos. The altercation had been 30 minutes long by my watch. It had been a brutal melee between the two combatants. I use the term combatant loosely because Red had done all of the physical contacting onto Mr. Amos. Some in the crowd wanted to go to Mr. Amos to prevent the beating. It had been horrible to witness. Red had delivered onto Mr. Amos the same manners, methods, and means of violence that Mr. Amos had delivered onto Dottie West with such incredible precision and accuracy. As I recall the incident in my visual memory, the feats she had displayed in that tavern that night had been truly unbelievable. I must state for the record as a witness to the event that as the melee had gone on, Red's eyes had changed to a red color. They had started from a light red illumination and peaked at a high-intensity red. My next statement may lead some to question my insanity or judgment to recall facts, but Red had looked like she had been an instrument of God's hands that had laid upon Mr. Amos in that altar or arena of retribution. It is my hope that I never am the one at the receiving end of that deliverance. Then, after the melee had subsided, Red had pulled the suspect closer to her body. She placed his head onto her thighs, and with a gentle hand that she placed on his head, she healed all of his injuries. Her eyes had changed to a bright green color that had illuminated the entire room. A green mist or vapor had emanated from her being and it healed the suspect or victim. When completed, it had appeared that the suspect had not been in any kind of altercation. Mr. Amos had still been upset from the trauma, had asked Red, "Why did you heal me? Why did you not let me die for the horrible things that I did?" Red had replied, "Now Demetrius, you understand the truth of what you did to Dottie West. I am sorry that it had to come to this. You cannot die today. I want you to live a long and happy life. I want Victoria and Mason to be able to love their son as I do. I want you and Sebastian to be good friends. I want Vanessa to love you again. I want you to have a successful career as a music producer. Finally, to answer your question, Demetrius, I am sorry that in 20 years from now, you will have the honor of explaining to your son, why you raped his mother and had become his father. Then, when you see all the hurt and pain in your son's eyes, then you will know that your pain and hurt had been self-inflicted. See, you're too young to know what it is like to be a parent, to know the joy of watching them grow and love. Mason knows, Gus knows, and now, you will know that what you did will be an injury that will never heal. Then Red had turned off the barrier and had tipped the band that had been playing through the entire altercation, and had walked home. To tie up some loose ends in this report, I had interviewed the suspect Demetrius Amos after the altercation. Mr. West had very little to say to the man. The two had learned at the same time that one would be a father and the other would be a grandfather. Mr. West told to Demetrius with his father, Mason at present, the only reason why you are alive, Demetrius, is because Red got to you before me. Had it been me in that arena, you would be dead. But, whether you like it or not, my daughter is going to have your child. I hope and I pray that I live long enough for you to explain why you raped that wonderful person, Dottie, to your son. After that exchange of words, Mr. West had gone and waited for me in the car to return to his home. The last section of this report deals directly with Mr. Demetrius Amos. I had the fortune of interviewing Demetrius with his father, Mason Amos, at Mason's Tavern after the fight had completed. I had informed him that under current law that I could arrest him on several counts, and that based on evidence and testimony from many witnesses that he would go to prison for a very long time. I told him that his actions would have far-reaching consequences beyond the assault. I had taken the opportunity to remind the young man that racial tension had been growing in the county and it had been at an all-time high. People with political aspiration are going to use this event to propel their propaganda to whatever gains they can achieve. However, I had decided not to arrest Mr. Amos at the time. I had told the suspect that if Miss West had decided to file charges and if the county district attorney decided to make an example out of the suspect, there had been very little the sheriff could do about it. I had felt that the matter had been settled by Red in terms of retribution. His day in court would come soon enough. However, once the word of this matter had gotten out to the general public, the suspect, probably had wished I arrested him.
It's pretty good. I like the flow of how everything's going. We still gotta finish this last piece, and as we were doing the review, I was going through it in my head, the review of the second book of the last few days. I wanted to get the timeline out of the way, and then
4 p.m. May 5th, 2019, Athenatas Journal, December 9th, 1955. Note, we had decided to make this journal entry through our symbiote eyes. Roxy will be the person to record this entry to prevent bias from affecting the accuracy of the tale. It is a terrible tale. We are ashamed of ourselves for acting in such a manner. However, instinct had informed us that this needed to be done. After Red had left Dottie alone in her apartment, or the place of that horrific carnage that had been delivered upon our friend and loved one, we had made our way upstairs to our apartment and changed into a pair of jeans, a tank top, and a jean jacket. Red put on a pair of boots and she had put on her hat. She had grabbed her purse and wallet. Last, she grabbed her lasso and tied it onto her belt. Then, she had walked off to find Demetrius. On the long road that went into town, Red had decided to walk there. She had been enraged mentally. Outwardly to the world, she had appeared calm and at peace, but deep inside, she had been on fire. "Oh Red, what are you going to do?" asked Hestia. "We are going to demonstrate to Demetrius the error of his ways. We are going to deliver onto him what he had delivered onto Dottie," Red said. "Perhaps, violence is not the right answer for this, Red," said Themis. "We do not know if it will be, Themis. We are letting our heart guide us through this night," Red said. "I am with you, Red. Retribution must be served this night." Nemesis said. "Red, I am concerned with what you said to Dottie back there. You had asked why she had made some of the decisions that she had made. I am concerned that you have taken the blame for the matter." Hestia said. "You know that it is true, Hestia. We let this go on for far too long. We had let this go on and should have stopped it before it had escalated," Red said. Sometime later, after the sun had set around 8 o'clock in the evening, we had made our way to Mason's Tavern. As we had walked up to the door, the security guard had made an observation of us. We could read in his head that he knew we were there to hit some guy. What made the whole matter funny had been that he had opened the door and did not try to stop us. I know that look in your eyes, Red. I don't know who it is or what he did, but you got those red glowing eyes and they say, he's a dead man. So, I am going to open this door and let you go on in, he said. Thank you, we said. Red had just walked into the tavern and made a quick survey of the crowd that had settled into the place on this Friday night. It had been a big crowd. There had been a band on stage playing a mixture of jazz and blues. We had made visual confirmation of Demetrius and Sebastian. The two had been sitting at a table located near the dance floor. Red's eyes shifted back to blue. We walked over to the bar where Mason had been pouring drinks for people. He had been the main bartender for the night. Red, what brings you by tonight? Mason asked politely. Red smiled and in a soft voice said, Mason, I apologize in advance for the damage I am about to do to your place. I am going to place 20 bars of gold here on top of the bar ahead of time. Red pulled out 20 bars of 400-ounce gold bullion and set them on top of the bar. Then she walked over to Demetrius. Demetrius had been surprised to see us walking towards him and Sebastian. Oh no, Demetrius. Do not get up on our account. Good evening, Sebastian. We smiled at the two men. Sebastian, you may want to go take a seat at the bar. Demetrius and I are about to exchange some words, we said. Sebastian had looked confused by what we had just said to him. Mason had looked confused towards us as well. Then, Red made an announcement to the entire room of people. You nice folks are having a wonderful time tonight, but I am going to have to ask you to step back a few yards to give Demetrius and us some room to have a frank discussion about manners. Red took out her lasso and tossed it in the air. The magical artifact had expanded out and started to oscillate in a circular motion. The device had formed a barrier between us and the crowd of people. The lasso had formed into a transparent force field. Demetrius stood up and started to say a few words. No, Demetrius, you have said enough this night. You, nice folks, see, Demetrius has gone and smacked up my friend Dottie West tonight. He smacked her up really good tonight, didn't you? We said. What are you talking about, Red? He said. Enough of your lies, Demetrius. Hestia, show the nice folks what Demetrius Amos had done to poor Dottie West tonight, Red said in a quiet and polite voice. As the lasso had been oscillating about the room in a circular pattern, the barrier between the crowd and the two people inside projected the real-time image of what had happened to Dottie. The lasso had not been shy nor bashful about the violence that had been inflicted upon Dottie West. The crowd of people had seen little Dottie West be smacked around by Demetrius. They had seen how he punched her face many times. They had seen how he threw her defenseless body on the coffee table and broke it. They had seen how he had pushed her head into the wall of the apartment and injured her face down to the bone. They had seen how he ripped her clothes from her body and had raped her many times. The drunken rage that Demetrius had displayed in the imagery had been felt by all who had looked upon the image. Many in the crowd had been silent. Many in the crowd had been crying. Many had been horrified by the display. They had seen how he took her from behind and pulled her left arm back and stepped on her right thigh and broke it. They had seen how he broke her left arm while trying to pull it back. They had seen how he pushed her onto her dinner table and raped her again, and again, and again. Mason Amos had been hurt the deepest by what he had witnessed. He had not known the words to explain such cruelty that his son, who he loved deeply, could commit such a terrible act. Vanessa had seen it all too. From the words exchanged by Dottie and Demetrius in that horrific scene, she had been made witness to the truth. She had been hurt the most from the display, for she loved Demetrius, or she had thought she loved that man. Unknown to us at the time, Gus and the sheriff had been made witness to the events that had transpired in Dottie West's apartment. The two men had come into the bar and had taken a seat at the bar. They did not want to stop Red on her delivery of retribution. Who could blame them? So now, you nice folks, I am going to demonstrate onto Demetrius why this behavior is never acceptable. This is going to be hard for some of you to witness, but anyone who gets in my way will be met with bodily harm, Red quietly said. And after that, Red had begun the terrible delivery of retribution onto Demetrius. The altercation had been one-sided. It had been a 30-minute altercation, basically, with Red smacking Demetrius around. Initially, he had tried to put his arms up to defend himself, but they just ended up being broken. For 30 minutes, Red had used her fist, her feet, and her body to hit Demetrius in the head and the body. It would be misleading to state that Red had been upset or angry. Quite the contrary, she had been calm and relaxed the entire time. She just kept on hitting and hitting him the entire time. If you could set a metronome to the fight, then every second that had gone by would be the sound made as her hands and feet made contact with his skin. Red had used the necessary and sufficient force to beat Demetrius to a pulp. He had been a bloody mess. She broke his face, his arms, and his legs. She broke his back on top of the table. His head hit the ground and ceiling repeatedly, over and over again. The violence had continued. As the fight had continued, Red increased the amount of force incrementally. The crowd in witness had been horrified. Some people made attempts to stop it, but the lasso would not let them cross the barrier. Unknown to the crowd and unseen by the crowd, Red had transported Demetrius to a pocket dimension. There she had transformed herself into a giant version of Demetrius Amos, and in that form, she had raped him as he had done to Dottie. She had transformed him into Dottie West. She had made him experience the humiliation and hopelessness that Dottie had experienced when he had raped her. Only, she had raped him again and again. After the 30-minute melee had subsided, young Demetrius Amos had found himself lying on the floor a beaten mess. He had many injuries. Red had walked alongside him with tears in her eyes. She had still been in her normal quiet demeanor that all had come to know. Red pulled Demetrius to her side and rested his head onto her thigh. She had placed her hands onto his body. Her eyes had changed to an emerald green color. It lit up the whole room. In a graceful and beautiful manner, she had healed up all of his injuries. The crowd had been stunned at this event. Demetrius had been laying on her thigh still in shock from all the trauma he had suffered, but he had looked as if the fight had never taken place. There had still been blood on the ground and the furniture had been broken, but all of his injuries had been healed. Red held his head into her arms and pulled him in tight as a mother does for her son. Demetrius looked confused. "Why did you heal me? Why did you not let me die for the horrible things that I did?" he asked while crying. "Now Demetrius, you understand the truth of what you did to Dottie West. I am sorry that it had to come to this. You cannot die today. I want you to live a long and happy life. I want Victoria and Mason to be able to love their son as I do. I want you and Sebastian to be good friends. I want Vanessa to love you again. I want you to have a successful career as a music producer. Finally, to answer your question, Demetrius, I am sorry that in 20 years from now, you will have the honor of explaining to your son why you raped his mother and had become his father. Then, when you see all the hurt and pain in your son's eyes, then you will know that your pain and hurt had been self-inflicted. See, you're too young to know what it is like to be a parent, to know the joy of watching them grow and love. Mason knows, Gus knows, and now, you will know that what you did will be an injury that will never heal." And with that, Red had released the force field and had tipped the band 1 billion bar of gold. Amazingly, through all that trauma, the band had never stopped playing. They had just kept on providing music for all. No one tried to stop her and no one would. She had just said her piece and quietly walked home.
5 p.m. May 25, 2019, Mason's Journal, December 9, 1955. Well, where can I start today? I do not really know. For the most part, my day had been happy and joyful. I should have taken this as a sign from God. The end of today had ended at a very sad place. I can probably state that as a father, it had been the saddest day that I had known up to this moment in my life. Based on what has been revealed to me today, there will be one sadder day in about 20 years or so, but that is all in God's hands now. I had been tending the bar on Friday as I often do. As a person who spent most of his days working down at the concrete plant for a better part of 30 years, serving drinks to people and listening to their stories is a welcome change for me. Anyway, I had been tending the bar when Red had walked into the place. She had always been a quiet person. She had been the person who had given me the money to buy this place and to pay for the construction of the building. It is safe for me to state that without Red, Mason's Tavern would not exist, and I would still be working down at the concrete plant. She had given Victoria the money to go to college and for when she is ready for law school. She had never asked me for anything in return. For me, I know Red to be good people. Red had approached the bar in her quiet and friendly demeanor. I could tell by the look in her eyes that she had been there for something serious. She had said to me, "Mason, I apologize in advance for the damage I am about to do to your place. I am going to place 20 bars of gold here on top of the bar ahead of time. That is $424,000 with 20 bars at 400 ounces at $53 an ounce in 1955. Then, She had turned and had walked over to where my son Demetrius had been sitting with his friend Sebastian. This behavior had concerned me. At the time, I did not know all the details that I do now, but my son, Demetrius, had been acting weird for the last several days. Now, for the most part, Demetrius's behavior is joyful. He is a bright and intelligent man when he wants to be. I say this last statement because Demetrius had not been acting in a responsible manner, in my opinion, for some time. Ever since Dottie West had the idea to make him her business manager for her singing career, he had a good streak of fortune. I know that Dottie could have given that job to a more qualified person, but because she is the type of woman who leads with her heart, she extended my son an olive branch. In this day and age, 1955 America, a black man having a job as a music producer and business manager for a white woman in the country music field in Athens, Georgia had not only been unheard of, but it had been illegal to do. But kids are kids and they have dreams of changing the world. I appreciate the fact that Dottie had extended this offer to my son. Since they had grown up together on Dottie's cotton farm and had spent most of their childhood together, it would make sense to me that she gave him an opportunity that had been aligned with his dreams. However, Demetrius had taken advantage of Dottie West and Vanessa Montenegro. Now, I do not want to suggest that he had set out to take advantage of the two women. I feel that he took advantage of the moment because he had been a young immature man. He had these two women that he loved and could not be in an open relationship with one because of the law, but she had been the gravy train, and, not knowing where they would end up, probably contributed to the mess that had become of their relationship. I am not saying that it had been right or had been wrong. I am just stating my observations as I had known them at the time. Young people can find themselves in strange situations. Heck, old people still get in those situations. I had just wanted to state for the record that Demetrius is not entirely at fault here. Sure, what he had done to Dottie West should have never happened. I had not raised my son to behave that way. It saddens me to no end to have witnessed such cruelty from the man I had raised. His mother Victoria had been wounded deeply by what she had witnessed. Victoria had to demonstrate a lot of restraint at the beatdown that had occurred by Red to her son. No parent wants to see any level of cruelty inflicted on their children. Red too had seemed conflicted. She had cared about the children. I write children, but all four of them are adults now. Red had seemed genuinely sad at the altercation. As the father of Demetrius, I had been deeply hurt by witnessing such an event. However, I do understand why it had to occur. A wrong had been done to Dottie West, and my son had made the mistake of upsetting the quiet red-headed friend of Dottie West. As much as the struggle to end segregation in the United States is a cause I will champion until the end, the women in our country have an even greater road to travel. I had known when Red had placed those 20 bars of gold upon the bar tonight, she was going to do some bodily harm to someone. I had not known it would be Demetrius, but I did know that for Red, this had become personal. As I had stated before, I had known Red to be good people. For me, that is not just cute talk for the moment. I had witnessed her do some remarkable things in the community. I have seen her heal people that would otherwise be dead. I have seen her find people that had been long lost. What she did for little Ruby Tuesday had touched my heart so deeply. What many do not know about Red is that she walks everywhere. I do not know why she walks everywhere. I only know that she does it. With as much money as she has, she could easily buy herself a car, but she has not done so, and I respect that. I do know that she spends her nights working at Dottie's West Aunt's place, one of the local cat houses in town, and I do know that she spends her morning working on Gus's farm, and afternoon working at Dottie's boutique, and she is always around her daughter, Diana. In just the 5 short years that Red has lived in our small town of Athens, Georgia, she had become well known to many men and many women at her nighttime job. Now, I write this last part to give context to how much I love Red. It is not an attempt to discredit her or to stand in judgment of her. I get the sense that Red working down at Eveline's place had more to do with helping out the family and not for the money. And heck, Red is an attractive woman. Oh, I have looked. I do notice that she is not aging like other women at her age are doing. She has been in our small town for 5 years and women who were younger than her now look older to her. I have witnessed her pass through the local hospitals every morning on her walks and heal people up who have been cast aside as terminal illness. I know that she works with Father Michaels on the weekends as he does his Sunday morning rituals. She just stands quietly by as the people accept their wafer and heals them up. When she had healed my son up on the dance floor after she had beat him down, I had been astonished. I had never known someone in my life that would heal up or help the person that had done them wrong like that. She could have left him there to die, but she did not. Heck, she had tipped the band. Then, when she had revealed that Demetrius had gotten Dottie West pregnant, that had shocked me. For a long moment, I could not find the words to speak. I had held my wife in my arms to comfort her. Truthfully, I do not even know what my thoughts ought to be for this particular situation. On one hand, I have to love my son. We are a family. However, I cannot simply look the other way. With a grandson on the way, Dottie West is now family too. We are connected and we will always be connected. And Gus, that man has always been there for my family. He had allowed Victoria and Rick Sanders to use his farm to host the political rallies for segregation for free every year, even after the first one that ended in a riot. He had given Demetrius, Vanessa, and Sebastian a job with fair wages while they had been teenagers. His brother Paul had been the contractor that had built Mason's Tavern when no other contractor in town would take the job. It saddens me to no end when I see the pain in Gus's eyes. It downright angers me. With each flash of pain that wounds my heart, I just held my wife to anchor myself from doing something I would regret. My thoughts had gone to Vanessa. She had cared for Demetrius for a long time, ever since they had been teenagers. For her, she had always had a childhood crush on Demetrius, and he had always known it. He had taken advantage of that love many times. Had he gone too far? I do not know. I only know that my son has what some people term as angel eyes. He likes to smooth the girls over with his soft demeanor and soft caring voice to woo them into liking him. I do not know where he inherited that from, more than likely his mother. It certainly did not come from me. Heck, I cannot even woo myself into doing stuff, let alone other people. My thoughts on Sebastian. I do not know where to start. Sebastian and Demetrius had always been friends. Sebastian and Vanessa are brother and sister. They had all grown up with Dottie West since they were in kindergarten. I am not surprised that Demetrius and Sebastian developed feelings for Dottie. She is a very attractive woman, and she has genuine musical talent. When she sings at our place, the place packs in with customers and people all get very quiet for her. Dottie has a lot of love in her heart. It is infectious. For Sebastian, I had not known that he and Dottie had been seeing each other. From what little that I do know of the situation, my son had been going between Vanessa and Dottie. Vanessa had been the girl at home, and Dottie had been the girl on the road. Sebastian had been there to help Demetrius. To be fair, Sebastian has a good heart and a good mind. He is a wiser man than my son. In many ways, he has a better business sense than my son, but Demetrius does have a talent at combining things together. He does have musical talent, but he and Dottie lack personal experiences to incorporate that into their musical careers. Although, Dottie has been growing in that aspect, and my son has not. Unfinished section.
Alright, that's a pretty good review. Let this finish out here. Okay. Well, the computer. So, it's a pretty good review. We have to finish up the last part of that story, which deals with, deals with Victoria, and the last part of Mason's journal there. And Mason doesn't have a whole lot more to add, but then we have to add Victoria's, which she has to finish out another 2,000 words she has to crank out, which I think we could do. Through Victoria, she's going to be the voice that deals with the segregation issue of the book directly, and at this point of the book, At this point of the series, from 1950 to 1955, it's the beginning of that whole segregation movement. And what has occurred in this week, December 1st, the day that Apollo shows up, that's when Rosa Parks in Montgomery, Alabama, sits on that bus, and then Martin Luther King, he lives in Atlanta, Georgia, which is just a few miles down from Athens, Georgia, and it's just incidental that he's from Atlanta. We're going to incorporate that into our story, and it's one of the angles I'm sort of working on. When we present Martin Luther King in the story, we're going to present him as a Baptist minister, and he's has a doctorate in I guess religion and religious studies, and he's a Baptist minister. And Aunt Dottie is Baptist, Gus is Baptist, and just happens that Attic Candy and Steve Trevor are Baptist. So Diana is not Baptist, but in the 5 years that she's been in the town, she's been working offhand with a lot of the lay leaders in town, the Catholics, the Baptist, Methodist, and non-Christian religion. She's slowly been feeling her way around, helping people. A lot of the pagans, which most pagans, they don't really go to a church to practice their religion. They do it from home, usually, most of them. And then she's familiar with a lot of them, and at least the ones that have been approachable to her. So when this book ends, we're getting into the very beginnings of what becomes the Civil Rights Movement and the passage of what will be the Civil Rights Bill of 1966, 1967. And up to that point, it results in, one, Martin Luther King being assassinated, and also with the riots in Illinois at the Democrat National Convention, which was held in Chicago. And not only was there a riot in there, but there was a riot in Baltimore. And one of the reasons why we staged Gotham City in Baltimore is so that we could talk about this issue in the 1960s, 66, 67. And this results in basically the Democratic Party imploding. And now we have to, for the sakes of full disclosure, I'm a conservative Republican, so I'm writing from a Republican sort of mindset. But the way we're presenting the story through our character, we're presenting her as a neutral character. And when we're presenting these, which are historical facts, into the story, we're going to try to deal with them as a factual thing and through an anthropological perspective. By anthropological, what that means is anthropology studies culture, and that's their thing. And they study humans and primates that are associated with human primates, what they call hominins. And so that's gonna put it in perspective of, here's this community, here are one group versus another group, and then how they relate in terms of family and lineage. That's so anthropology, they study the lineage of each of the families, how they interact, and then generational. And so they review the matter of Athens, Georgia, from all those perspectives, which is somewhat historical. But it's not history in its entirety, because there's several different, from a scientific point of view, being the science fiction part of the story, we have to approach it and break it down into different parts. The anthropological part deals with the culture. We have the what are the white Americans, black Americans, in this case metahumans, old, young, middle-aged, that type of stuff. And then on the psychological level, we're dealing with mental processes and behavior and of all the organisms and how they relate to each other, and the different psychological factors going on with the main characters and the side characters. And so, and that sort of gets into the whole love affair thing. And on a microcosm level, this family, the West, has to sort of deal with this. The whole issue of segregation is smack in the middle of their family. And Athenata there is a witness to this whole thing, and she's our Angelico. She represents our immortal or Angelico person in the story, and she's the neutral character. And so, on one side of the story, on a personal level, you have the West, who were coming to the story kind of in a neutral position. They're on the side of the segregation, integrating society, but at the same time, they don't live in that culture, so they're sort of aliens to the Black American culture. And when we deal with the Black American culture in this story, they're about 3 to 4 generations from when they were slaves. And the next book, where we deal with the story of Joe West, he's born in that book, but which is 1956, and he's born at the end of the year. Actually September or October of the year. And but we're going to meet in that story his great-grandfather, who was a slave, and he's in his 90s now, and he dies. And they have a funeral for him at the West farm, and he didn't have any land, so the West decided to bury him in they have their own private property on their farm where they can intern the remains of their loved ones. And so they, because they're family now, they have his name is Joe West or John Joe Brown, something like that. Anyway, I had to look it up. Joe Amos. And but he is who they named Joe West after. But he shows up when the child is born. He dies right after that, after the child is born. But he helps his great-grandson. And everybody who's living in this community all knows someone who was a slave. But in 1950, they're all, from 1930 to about 1950, most of them are dying out. The ones who are in their 90s, like Joe, in the time of the 1860, he was like 10 or 11, right? The eldest survivor of the Battle of Gettysburg was a 16-year-old kid in the battle. He died in 1950. He was the eldest survivor of the battle. And if you see the movie Gettysburg, they show that little boy, drummer boy, that's who that guy is. He's the eldest person that survived the battle. But at the time of the battle, he was 16. And he was playing the drum. He was the cadence guy for the army. Which, in war, they hired people who weren't military people to do that. And so that's why he was at the battle. And then... but that guy, he was a slave. He was born a slave, and he became a freeman through the years and through their story. And we're going to get to explore the history of how that all came about, the resolution of that from prior to the Civil War, during the Civil War. And he's going to be the perspective of an actual slave character. And then when we're dealing with Victoria Mason, they're about 2 generations after that, so they weren't actually slaves, but their grandparents were. And so their parents were not slaves. They were actually the first generation that weren't slaves, Black Americans. And so we're going to start telling that story in this book. And Victoria Amos is the character or device vessel in which we're going to tell that story. And she's the character who starts off sort of, she's finished high school, but she went to, because the schools are segregated in this environment. So they went to an all-black school, an all-white school. And she wants to become a lawyer. And she couldn't go to law school, and she didn't have the education to go to law school. So Athenata meets her in the story, and she gives her the money to go to college, to boost her education, and to get a degree, and allows her to go to law school, and eventually to take the bar exam and become a lawyer, which she eventually does in the story. But at the time of this book, she's at the very beginnings of that. Mason, too. Athenata meets Mason Amos on her daily walks, and he works at when they first meet, he's working down at the concrete plant. And they end up talking a lot in the mornings when she's on her morning walks. And that's how she learns of this guy's story. And she helps him to build his bar, and she gives him the money to do it. And she secures all the legal documents and for him to overcome that. And she secures the financing and gets Gus's brother to build everything. And that's how Mason's Tavern comes about in the story. And then this incident happens, which the family sort of caught off guard with. At that point of the story, no one knows Demetrius to be a violent guy. And how we explain it psychologically is that he, kind of like Diana or Athenata in the story, he takes everything in. He's a young man, so he doesn't have a lot of control, and he has a lot of hatred inside him that he holds back. And he put a lot of faith and trust in Dottie, and for him, when Dottie admits that she has this affair with his best friend, he doesn't know how to respond to that. He doesn't have the coping mechanisms at his age to deal with that. He feels betrayed on a very deep, deep level, because he, like his mother, wanted to believe in integration of the races. But at the same time, he's sort of, part of his peers are like, why are you seeing this white woman? And part of his peers are like, we should be accepting of this. But to bring it home on a fictional level, we put them all in the middle of this. He's in this relation with this woman. And this woman's given him a lot because her career's going up, and they were friends. And on a psychological level and anthropological level, you sort of get to deal with people who were friends, and then they become lovers, and then this horrible event happens. And how did they live through that? In most stories, if this occurred, what they would probably do is the female and male would probably never get together again, or they might even abort the child. But we're not going to do that. In the next book, Dottie West is, I was thinking of doing it in this book, but Dottie West is going to go to this church. She's going to be sitting there in the middle of the night. And she prays to God. Then he comes to her. George Burns, in our story, he comes to her in her need, and they talk. And in their discussion, that's where Dottie sort of... There's a story with Dolly Parton that she tells where she finds God. And it's kind of a moving story. She was a little girl. And she found this church out in the middle of nowhere. She went into this church, and that's where her faith was sort of born. And so in our story, we're going to have a version of that. But in this story, she's an older woman. and she's been raped by this guy, and she doesn't know what to do. And in our story, we're going to deal with the sort of what the character wants to do, and inside she's conflicted. And she outwardly, she wants to keep the child, she wants to raise the child, but on some level she's hurt, and so she doesn't know how to deal with that. So she goes to this church and she talks with God like Athenata does, and they sort of work it all out. And but in their discussion, he asked her, well, ask me any question that you like. And instead of asking about herself, she asked about her friend, Athenata. And through that answer that God gives, that's where she decides she's going to keep the baby and raise her as her son. Because, well, it is her son. But she decides from that moment that she's going to go through it. And it's really because she has met Athenata in the story, and she knows, up to that point, she knows everything that Athenata has done for her daughters, that she feels kind of that that's sort of her path too. She has to do the right thing. And for her, the right thing is having a baby. She knows is going to be terrible, because they're in the middle of a segregated South, and it's a very divided community, and the guy who's going to be the father raped her, which can't be good. Can't be good. And the other mother, Vanessa, who we're talking about, sort of started this whole thread. She has to deal with that issue head on. Because at first, for her, segregation is sort of an outward entity. I mean, she's a black woman living in segregated Athens, Georgia. And there's one side of town, there's another side of town. And she wants to be a lawyer, and she's been given that opportunity. And then her son, she's happy for her son, but at the same time, she's trying to create an integrated world for what she believes is her culture. It's her worldview. But then this event happens with her son. And so it brings it home on a deeper level, because prior to that, it's sort of an outwardly thing. It's an outward entity. But now it's internal. She's not going to not love her son. And at that point, she liked Dottie West, but she wasn't in love with Dottie West. But the baby changes everything. And during the pregnancy, there's a lot of conflict. And people are even telling them that they should abort the child. And Dottie decides not to do that. She's decides to carry through it. But when the baby's born and the great-grandfather, Joe, shows up, that's when it's sort of the family as a whole, the Amoses and the West sort of come together as a family together. And except for Demetrius, he is not at the birth of the child. And his reason is he feels a lot of guilt. At the same time, he doesn't know what to do. And this is sort of his moment that Athenata faced at the very beginning of story of Diana. She was faced with this situation. She didn't know what to do. She didn't have any experience to guide her. But in her case, she decides to wait. And she decides not to do anything hastily. And she decides to sort of let everybody come to that sort of place and time on their own, which is what she ultimately decided to do, which in her case proved to be the right thing to do for everyone else, but the wrong thing for her. And then so in her story, Hippolyta, her mother, once she realizes everything that's going on, she sets out to right the wrong there. She feels that's her thing she has to do. But in Demetrius's cases, he decides that he doesn't want to be a burden to the family, his son. But what ends up ultimately happening is he creates a rift between his son and himself. He doesn't realize this until Joe West is an older man in the story. And he psychologically can't get over what had happened. And he ultimately decides not to go to the birth of the child, which he regrets later on. And then, but the other family, the entire family is there, including Vanessa, Sebastian, the West, the great-grandfather, Amos, he's there. And the uncles are all there, and everybody's there. Except for, I don't know, we haven't gotten that part yet, but everyone but Demetrius is there for the birth of the baby. And that's sort of how that story sort of comes to an end with that baby being born. And so, see, it's 4:53. I was kind of babbling there, but I'm kind of had to kill 30 minutes. But where we're going to go as a writing, starting tomorrow, sort of what we're going to be working. We're going to be working on the end of this story, and then we got to write chapter 11. Everything worked out very well with this chapter. We're only 2,000 words short of our 12,000 word mark. So if we can, we got to write out 2,000 words for Victoria, which I think Mason's finishing piece will be about 500 words or so, probably a little longer, which gives Victoria some time to write her story. And through that character, we're going to get to see the struggle through one of the Black American characters in the story. And I'm using the term white American and Black American because that's is the term that would have been used in 1955, and we have to call it something and categorize it. And as we get through the 50s and 60s in our series, we're going to start using different terminology. As we get closer into the 1980s and 1990s, we're going to sort of go with the trend wording that's used culturally without being derogatory. And I think that's the extent of it. Like when we use the term Negro in the story, that's the term that was used in the 1860s, and people are still using that term in the 1950s. And a lot of the documentaries that I've watched a lot of documentaries from the 1940s and 1950s. They're films, and that's from a learned or scholarly point of view, that's the terminology that was used at the time, which I think is appropriate in the book. What people call the N-word, I had decided we're not going to use that term in the book. Not that I'm against it or for it, but I don't think it'll be appropriate for the book. And I don't think it's necessary. I think we can achieve what we want to do without having to do that. And then we introduce the term in the book. I feel we have to go a long ways of explaining it. And I don't want to do that. I don't think we need to do that. I think we could leave it in terms of whatever the local colloquials are, from the scholarly people in the story. And then as we get into the Pacific people, you can creatively find a way to not evoke anger in the story. Although I think on some levels the story does evoke emotion in people, anger being one of those emotions. We don't want people conflicted with the story. We want people conflicted with the characters in the story. And what ultimately the characters do in the story is what people outwardly, the audience, should be experiencing in the story. I think on a deeper level that makes sense to me as a writer. So let's go ahead and get set up for the Nightbot playlist. So we didn't get a whole lot of writing done, but we're sort of in a transition. We got the timeline done. That was important. That had to be done. That's what I call logistics part of writing. We had to do all the logistical stuff, and we need to get that timeline written for this book. And the writing of this book really helps us set up the stuff going on in book 3 and 4. And it's helping us in that it's allowing us to fill out certain characters like Athena, Hermes, Hippolyta, the long age characters, and where the story is going to go. It helps us to anchor and to know exactly for the books from books 4 to book 19. It allows us to know what emotional tone we need to set in all those books to get us to where we need to be by book 18 in the story. And then books 19, 20, and 21 are all going to have an A and B label. And these are all the A labels to deal with Athenata. The B labels are, I decided for the other people in the story, we're going to break it down into 3 books. And so they all get split up in book 18, which is in 1945. And then in book 19 is when Athenata goes to Darkside, and the other people are left to deal with it. What's going on? And then this is book 20. So we split the story up. So the people in the B arc, we're going to get to see what happened to them in their own books, 2 books. And then everybody comes back together in book 20 at the very end, chapter 12. And then from that word on, the story is consolidated. But book 19, there's going to be 2 different book 19s, and they are going to be, at this point, they could change numbers, but there's going to be a book A and a book B. And the book B is going to be everybody else's story, absent of Athenata, what they did in the 5-year period that she was gone. Remember, for her it was only 30 days. For everybody else it was 5 years. And so that one book has to span 5 years, which isn't a long shot. This book spans 5 years, so it's not unheard of. The book The Pirates, which is book 6, that spans 5 years. So at this point in the series, it's not unheard of. And then the book Trials of Athena is told in 12 parts because the trial, she has to go through 12 trials of Athena. And but I don't know how actual long the story is in terms of months or years. I have to figure that all out. I only had the first chapter of that book finished, so still filling that book out. So here we go. We're gonna switch over. It's 5 o'clock now. There's gonna be a 30-second delay, and then we'll switch over, and then we'll be in the intermission. Go ahead and get that screen up. Here we go, and we'll be back.